I think we have a few words from our session convener. And just a brief note about the format of this session. We've got a lot of very cool things going on, but basically we're the only session with a film and possibly a riot. So we will see if we can have everything. So we'll turn you over to our organisers here in the first part of our session.
Right, so as you can probably tell, I'm literally still in the process of writing an introduction to this session. So I heard this phrase in the morning session, which was archaeology is a process of putting fragments together. Thank you. And I'm here to do with fragments, half-formed thoughts and feelings and ideas that are messy and raw. This session came about from a presentation that Penny and I attended about a year ago, and it was billed as a manifesto on the topic of women in power. And we came away with a feeling of unease and discomfort, because it felt like, in a conversation about women in power, we hadn't really seen a kind of an intersectional interrogation of what power might mean and the implications of that. And also a kind of sense of discomfort that we'd sat and we'd talked and come out and nothing had really changed. And I'm coming here today with a feeling of discomfort, feeling that why am I here standing in this room in front of people who are doing amazing work and not being sure I'm the right person to do that. I'm coming here with a feeling of anger that we've had these conversations and nothing has changed and things are not changing fast enough. But archaeology is about bringing fragments together. And what I hope we can do today is bring together a lot of voices and really actually see something happen. So actually I have to turn to Cecilia now, who are going to talk in a much more controlled and prepared way.
I don't know about that, but obviously, thank you, Beth, and thank you everyone for being here today. To follow on really from kind of Beth's introduction where we started, I would share her view that we spent a while thinking, what are we doing here? Is this for us? This isn't our research. We don't look into kind of gender issues in archaeology, but we're a bit mad and kind of wanted to do something about it. And I'm really grateful for everyone kind of joining us, and well, I guess it's us joining you really. So yeah, really excited about this. I thought before we kicked off, I would throw up some figures of the picture of archaeology in the UK. I know that this might be potentially relatively well-trodden ground. I think in a session this morning there are a number of figures on diversity in commercial archaeology, but I think I'm not going to go through them all, but just in the background, I'm sorry it's a horrible slide and a lot of text, but wanted to put these up just to emphasise some of the structural issues. I think what they don't show are some of the kind of hidden stories or personal stories. For some things we don't have statistics because they're not collected, but here is a start. And I really wanted to emphasise what Beth was saying about the intersections being, I think, where some of the issues that we like to talk about and kind of improve action on, where they're really kind of exacerbated and come to the fore. So I guess the session today, what we want to get out of it really is move on from the discussion and move towards action and change. I know there's been lots of, or several kind of documents of guidance, and there's lots going on, and we want to really redouble efforts, I suppose, to build on that and come up with something, be that I'm not going to dictate the output, be that an article, a publication, or just kind of a handful of points that we can all sign up to and think, yes, actually we can all get behind this and do something different in the future. Before I hand over to Cecilia for her words of introduction, I'd like to say if we were physicists thinking about power, apparently, and I didn't know this before this morning, but power is, in physics, requires change in a system and a specified time for that change to occur. And I think that time has come. So looking forward to today. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Penny, I go a little bit more into figures because as I don't have a permanent contract, and this seems to be quite an important element of power in academy. And I've been running around half Europe in the last few years. And I wanted to have a look at what happened, for instance, in Germany, the place I live more or less, Italy, the place where I come from, and Spain, where my institution is. And what we'll see is that the figures are surprisingly similar in this part. So how the percentage of female professors are identified as females. In Germany, here we have around the maximum level is around 20%. Was 2017. This is Italy, and Italy is the place I come from, but also it's even worse because we know that in two years ago, the 27% of women had a career or a superior education against the 17% of men. But let's look at the highest level here. And again, it's 20% of female full professorships. And this is the data from my own institution, the CSIC. So here, I think we see very nice data. I think that the feminist movement in Spain is powerful, is strong, and we have a more optimistic figure. We have 25% of professors that are full professors, but of course, just after the PhD, where the figures are similar, it starts to change everywhere. So what I feel when I look at this data, and this is what I felt, the same sensation that I felt when Penny and Beth came into the room and started to talk about their experience at the talk by that participated, is rage, honestly rage or anger. And the question here we asked ourselves when we wanted to do something is anger enough? Can we speak about women being women in archaeology or identify ourselves as female archaeologists? Is that enough to talk about it? I think that in this book that came out last year, I found a partial answer. At least I found out that anger is fine for women. Because in this book, the author demonstrates how we also are supposed to feel bad about feeling angry. And so now to make a great example of how feeling angry things can be put into a changed perspective, I'm very pleased to introduce the film and the author of the idea and protagonist of this film with Sara Traba, Dr. Blanco Rotea from Spain, came here today to present her film about being a woman in a male collective talking about conflict, archaeology, and war. And it will be very interesting. I don't have many other words to introduce her trajectory. She is from the University of Santiago de Compostela, a postdoctoral researcher, but she's also part of the Galician Cultural Council section Heritage, where she organizes also a film festival about women and films and heritage. So the floor is yours, Rebecca. And she will give a brief presentation of the movie, and then we'll have the pleasure to see the movie itself. Thanks.
Thanks, Cecilia. I'm very nervous. I'm trying to speak slowly. And I want to explain why we do this film and how we do this film. Well, first of all, we would like to thank the organizer of the panel for allowing to participate in this panel with this modest documentary. And we hope to be able to contribute in some way to the debate on women to power. In a some way intimate perspective that connect with the approach we take in the research collective Roman Army, but also from my own postdoctoral project, Frontal Landscape in Early Modern Age, from Archaeology to Society. In them, we attach great importance to the relationship of archaeology with community in the processes of knowledge production, especially female collectives, and to the search for formulas for use of fortified landscapes as a sustainable cultural and socioeconomic research. Secondly, the work presented here is based on the idea that there is a significant absence of women in the processes of knowledge production, in the construction of histories, and in the conversion of this type of heritage into a cultural and socioeconomic research. The documentary is not intended to be a product that sets the answer to the questions we ask ourselves, but rather to dialogue precisely with these collectives, with local communities, with women, and with the other professional colleagues. Well, this is the structure of the presentation, and we watch the film in this part. Well, there is the two. This short film is made from a research collective, Roman Army, and a postdoctoral research project, named, that I said before, Frontal Landscape from Archaeology to Society, FLANS. And Roman Army is a collective of researchers working on the study of the Roman military presence in the Northwest Iberian Peninsula. Roman Army was created in 2016. It seeks to have competencies, knowledge, and synergies to explore new channels of research based on experimentation and innovation, but also on the scientific rigor and the quality of research. And in the case of plants, frontal landscape in early modern age, that was my postdoctoral project that finished in June of 2019. And in this, our research focus refers to the fortification system of the Portuguese-Galician frontier during the Portuguese Restoration War in the 16th century, and its materiality and the analysis of the following aspects with archaeological entity at present in landscape. What are the relationships between the archaeological entities themselves and between them and the territory? What are the connections between the local communities and the existing heritage resources? How can we integrate local communities into the overall processes of generating knowledge? And what role women play within conflict archaeology? We have several transversal outcomes that you can see here, and I highlight this one to contribute towards the appreciation of the role of women within the wider scientific research by developing local female strategies to incorporate this group into the local communities. Well, Roman Army is seen as a transdisciplinary collective in permanent construction and therefore constantly changing, but always based on well-defined ethical principles and social commitment. In this social commitment that has led us to establish a communication strategy focuses on the one hand, on the socialization of knowledge, and on the other, on the interaction with the general public interested in this research topic, but also on involving local communities in the construction of knowledge itself. In fact, the intervention carried out involved these communities at different scales. This strategy includes the creation and maintenance of a website, this one, communication via to social networks, and a commitment includes the creation and a commitment with local communities and with the heritization processes from these types of sites. And in the case of plants, frontier landscape in early modern age, in the case of plants, our strategy is the same that in Roman army. First, with a strategy fundamentally undertaken by the research collective that have studied this space. We do give visited and heritage works, activities in schools, develop of our website too, and production of audiovisual materials. And in a second strategy, which is the one that has gradually managed to turn heritage into a cultural research. It was involved with different activities carried out by citizen collectives, local communities, and private initiatives, as well as other carried out by local, regional, and national and international public administrations. Well, the project behind the documentary that we're going to see after, it was possible because we obtained a small grant from the Council of Berín. Berín is a small city in the south of Galicia. Of Berín were allocated 2 rare archaeological sites. It was supported too by the research groups Synthesis from the University of Santiago de Compostela and the INCIPIT for the Spanish National Research Council, as well as the support of 2 local cultural associations and 2 for Fernando Cerrulla Reds, a forensic researcher from the Institute of Campo in Ciudad de Niña. Apart from a prior study using geospatial, as a research, we were able to carry out an archaeological prospecting study using remote detection techniques in the site of Outeiro de Arnaz and Alto do Circo, with the aim of identifying their function and chronology in archaeological terms. The study lasted 7 days, involving an interdisciplinary team in which 4 people from the local area also took part of this project, 2 neighbors, an archaeologist, and the forensic Fernando Cerrulla. Apart from a prior study using geospatial technique, we can see here all the methodology that we use to know these 2 sites, 2 archaeological sites. And here we have some images from our archaeological fieldwork in Outeiro de Arnaz. Well, the documentary. Roman Army is seen as a transdisciplinary collective in permanent construction. Sorry, I take a moment. So, as we have already said, the social commitment of both collectives has led to establish, especially in the case of Roman Army, a communication strategy focused on the one hand to the socialization of knowledge and on the other to interaction with the general public. For this reason, it was a website and several pages of the social networks, and in the case of this project, a real-time communication of the progress of the project, which initiated through Facebook Live, which attracted a large number of followers. In Arnas and Alto Circo, the strategy that was designed focused in two areas: mediated corporate communication and direct corporate communication. The results were very remarkable. A 20% increase in Facebook page followers, a reach of 55,950 people on Facebook during the campaign. Facebook Live was identified as a versatile format for communication between small archaeological teams, and it allows for direct contact between archaeologists and the audience. All of this has been analyzed in detail in that publication that you can see here, and it reveals the existence of a clear gender imbalance in the context, showing a significantly larger male audience than female. We do not believe that this imbalance is related to a previous bias of the technological platform of the college itself. Other pages with very different cultural contexts may even have an inverse proportion to this one. More than 71% of the website audience are men. We will not have a clear explanation for this major gender imbalance in the construction of the information for Roman army. This may be a matter of context where cultural and even prior educational issues play a part in the construction of content about Roman army. Understanding the causes of the gender imbalance in the audience is an aspect of special interest in this investigation, and we hope to carry out a more in-depth analysis with new data. However, we were interested in attempting to carry out other actions to reduce this imbalance, and so we decided to carry out an experiment this film. Our collective is mainly made up of men. We are 8 men and 1 woman, an aspect that is common in the practice of conflict archaeology in our country, especially in certain periods. In fact, they are the ones who have designed with great successes this communication strategy, constructed the history and guided communication on the social networks. Our intuition to us that perhaps the construction of this history is an almost unidirectional way could be part of the reason for this imbalance. For this reason, we decided to convince someone with no connection to our project, archaeology in general, and Roman military history in particular, the field director and art historian Sarah Trava, lived with us during this period of field work, record us and create an audiovisual record that reflects one of these issues from her perspective. This documentary asks questions and explores them. How can we attract more women to conflict archaeology to participate in the production of knowledge? Or how can we involve them, diversify our work or perspective or our discourse in order to attract these other audiences? Well, the documentary, as we have already said, we started out on the basis of a number of premises. The first was not to direct Sarah, but that instead, that with this context in mind, she should formulate the idea. We also decided to organize the project exclusively from its feminine perspective, obviously communicating the general lines at what we were doing, but this time striving to ensure that the narrative comes from the minority group, the woman. We propose making a different interpretation to that which have been made to date in our audiovisual productions, making the site invisible. We don't say the name of the site. The scientific burden, both in the approach and in the participation in the documentary, we see faces but we do not see names except at the end of the film, placing the emphasis on the processes of deliberation. The woman is also made invisible. Her voice is heard off camera, and her image only appears at the end, when we introduce her into the process of deliberation, precisely as a metaphor for what the data revealed to us. The documentary explored 4 main topics: the landscape as an element that serves to organize our work on the frontier, and the roads as a communication structure between the past and the present. Archaeology as an element for reflecting on how we construct ourselves as a collective and as a society. The community as the central point of what we do, contributing and receiving. And women asserting their role in conflict archaeology, the construction of the archaeological discourse, and the construction of this heritage assessing other perspective. Now we were watching the short film, and then finish by talking about 4 ideas. If you put here in this seat, I think that you can see better the subtitles in English.
Si observas un poquito más, puedes ver cómo se percibe cómo el tiempo ha ido transformando el territorio y ha generado un paisaje, el paisaje que vemos hoy en día. Puedes ver cómo se entremezclan con los pueblos, con la estructura agraria, con las explotaciones forestales, incluso vitivinícolas en la zona, pues otros elementos como los yacimientos, en algún caso destacable, ¿no?, sobre el paisaje, pero sobre todo la importancia de los caminos, de la red de caminos histórica y actual, que al final es el elemento casi que hunde todo el paisaje, ¿no?, que te lleva de un punto a otro, que te lleva del camino al yacimiento, que te lleva de la explotación forestal a la explotación agrícola de otro tipo, y sobre todo la gran arteria de la modernidad que hoy en día, pues por una parte conecta las 2 partes del país, pero también al fin y al cabo es una herida, ¿no?, en la montaña, pero al final el camino es casi el elemento que lo une todo. Me llama la atención que cuando nos explicamos, cuando explicamos lo que hacemos, al fin y al cabo esto es importante descubrir, pero al fin y al cabo nosotros nos estamos construyendo a nosotros mismos. Lo que estamos haciendo es conocer a nuestras sociedades del pasado para al fin y al cabo explicarnos a nosotros mismos, ¿no? Entonces a veces tengo la sensación de que estamos arando con nuevas herramientas, ¿no?, lo cual produce más, lo cual produce más rápido, pero al final seguimos produciendo lo mismo, de cierto modo. No sé si me explico, ¿no? Y al final nosotros lo que nos dedicamos a hacer es a desandar caminos para volver a hacer el camino, es decir, vamos hacia el pasado para construir el futuro. Nos estamos preguntando sobre nosotros en otras épocas, pero al fin y al cabo es para entendernos a nosotros mismos. Entonces, para mí lo más importante en la arqueología no es descubrir, no es sino construirme a mí misma como persona y contribuir a construir mi entorno como sociedad, ¿no?
Ahora vais por el pueblo, ahí en un cruce que se llama Peto, que hay un santuario, según baja esa mano izquierda, en el cruce mismo. Por donde queráis, o tiráis por aquí, o tiráis por la izquierda.
Al fin y al cabo este proyecto, como otros que llevamos a cabo desde este colectivo, piensa mucho qué hacer con las comunidades locales y cómo integrarlas cada vez que vamos a hacer un trabajo. Entonces, en este caso no fue diferente, tuvimos un periodo previo de reflexión en el que intentamos un poco construir cuál era la mejor manera de trabajar. Por otra parte, implicar, hacer que formaran parte del proyecto, que participaran en él diferentes personas de allí, de la zona, con diferentes perfiles e intereses, incluso dentro del propio proyecto.
Desde aquí, un monte, había a segunda lomba, parece unha cabeza, parece un oso deitado de costas. Sin embargo, desde a tarefa, o lorouco parece un xigante saindo da terra. Unha pequena cabeza intentando sacar os brazos da terra.
Hay una cierta soledad, aunque es cierto que cada vez va menos, entre aquellos colectivos que trabajan en arqueología del conflicto sobre el papel de la mujer en ellos, ¿no? Entonces yo creo que esa ausencia de la mujer es en varios ámbitos, tanto, bueno, en una doble dirección. Por una parte, nosotras en general no trabajamos, no solemos trabajar en arqueología del conflicto, lo hacemos de una manera más secundaria, no como investigadoras principales de determinados proyectos o como directoras de determinados proyectos. Y por otra parte, hay un menor consumo por parte de la mujer sobre temas relacionados con el conflicto. Probablemente a las mujeres les interesa más un aspecto del mundo romano que no aquel relacionado con el mundo de la guerra. Estoy generalizando, pero lo cierto es que cuando nosotros analizamos nuestros niveles de audiencia, tanto de las redes sociales como del consumo de la web por parte de hombres y mujeres, sí es cierto que hay bastante diferencia entre el colectivo femenino y el colectivo masculino. Mediante recursos digitales, todos los días se presentaba los resultados del proyecto, cómo hemos ido avanzando, qué pensábamos hacer, el sitio, pues eso, cómo evolucionaban los yacimientos. Se hacía a través de las redes, con lo cual podía tener un seguimiento de gente de la comunidad que estuviera allí o no. Y además lo que hacía era mantener ese interés abierto. Y al mismo tiempo se colgaban prácticamente todos los días post en la página web, un poco contando nuestras experiencias y cómo hemos avanzado.
Los datos después lo podemos exportar a un shapefile, ¿no? Que es un formato de archivo vectorial que casi todos los softwares de GIS pueden leer y a partir de ahí tenemos
sucia, con las nuevas pintadas desgastadas, un guante de trabajo sujetando la tachuela, ¿no? Como era casi un momento heroico del proyecto. Como algo tan pequeño, tan no sé, casi secundario, puede explicar tantas cosas de un sitio, ¿no? Podemos analizarlo utilizando una perspectiva de zoom, ¿no? De mi relación con el proyecto, mi relación con el colectivo e incluso mi relación de la mujer en general con la arqueología del conflicto. Todo lo que pretendemos hacer dentro del colectivo, lo que hacemos es un trabajo muy horizontal. Los roles están muy bien marcados, cada uno de nosotros tenía un papel dentro del proyecto en función de su conocimiento. Pero sí es cierto que si lo observamos desde fuera, ciertos papeles los ocupan predominantemente hombres, ¿no? Sí me gustaría poder contribuir desde el trabajo que hacemos a la incorporación de más mujeres al estudio de la guerra, ¿no? Y de la materialidad de la guerra desde otras perspectivas diferentes a las que son habituales. Intentar pensar como pensamos nosotras, porque va a ser la única manera de al final acabar construyendo un discurso que nos interese. Si solo hablamos de ciertos aspectos de la arqueología del conflicto, al final solo acabaremos llamando la atención de ciertos colectivos, ¿no? Entonces yo creo que Por una parte debemos reivindicar el papel, la presencia de la mujer como profesional que trabaja en estos temas, pero también debemos empezar a plantearnos por qué el público es mucho menor en determinados colectivos, tanto de edad como de género, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, la idea es tirar un poco por aquí. Ver ahora con cierta perspectiva, pues desde cómo nos presentamos hasta las expectativas que teníamos, cómo se ha ido todo, incluso cómo ha ido evolucionando el trabajo de campo, es muy interesante porque precisamente entronca con lo que nosotros queremos hacer, que es reflexionar sobre cómo investigar, reflexionar sobre cómo trabajar en arqueología de conflicto, ver qué nos falla, qué podemos aportar.
Hola, buenos días. Vamos a iniciar un poquito más todo. ¿Conoces el título de la sesión?
Sorry. Well, as a conclusion, we can use this phrase, opening new roads by working, opening new roads by working them. I said at the start of this presentation that this documentary was not intended to be a final product, aimed at answering the question and concerns we put forward, but instead a dialogue about this topic with the local communities, with women, and with other professional colleagues. Based on our interest in investigating the processes behind the creation of knowledge, of facing up the new challenges, to question our own profession with the aim of improving it, attempting to resolve other conflicts, using archaeology as a tool for the empowerment of local communities through their heritage, and knowing ourselves as professionals, persons, and societies. They are all the starting points of this project. And all of this basis on the perception of science that we share, democratic, dynamic, open, feminist, and social, with the idea that this must contribute towards improving society by creating a public that is more critical and well-informed. This is a project that is still under construction, like practically everything that we do. There are still some steps left to complete it, discussing it with our colleagues, discussing it in the collective, presented in Berlin, in order to find an answer to the problem of its low consumption and to identify interest. The final objective is to try and understand what is of interest to the female collective of this archaeology, attempted to include a collective within our research that is underrepresented in Spain. We believe that this is important, and it's not a question of increasing audiences or having more followers on the social networks, but instead of making what we do multivocal and inclusive. If this does not happen, we will only be communicating and incorporating the process to one part of the society. And now, what can we do with this documentary? Now I have a new postdoctoral project, Architecture and Landscape of Change, large, allow us to have financial to complete this experiment. And now we're going to enlarge the documentary to record the action of the local women's collective, make a meta-documentary, and to experience new narratives, and finally to work to try to integrate women in conflict archaeology. Well, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. That was really interesting, and I think we're very lucky to have actually had some filmic entertainment. So that will form the basis of what will happen next, which I hope will be extremely interactive. So the structure of this, it's sadly not all of our panel members could actually be here in person, so some of us will be reading statements. But what we'd like to do is basically, everyone who is here today has something useful to say about women in power in archaeology. There's Becky. So what we're going to do is actually we're going to invite all of our panel members to give just a very short introduction, because this session is meant to be not the normal feminism and archaeology session that you have all been to 500 times, where we talk about the horrible things and we talk about some of the theory. This session is meant to get actual action points onto a piece of paper. This section is meant to highlight things that we think can be actioned and should be actioned. So the format will go. Everyone will be invited to come up. I think a couple people have slides or a couple statements. We're going to have everyone come and say their piece. This panel has a vast amount of experience and is able to summarize, I think, a lot of the situation for archaeology in the UK. So we're going to take advantage of that. The scribbling team here will be taking notes on the problems we identify, the actions we identify, and that is going to form the basis for our later discussion. And I would very much like to invite the audience to contribute. So after the statements, we'll take a short break, and then we will go to a full panel mode where everyone will have a chance to respond to the problems that were raised. I would very much invite the audience to, if you have a point you would like to add or feel hasn't been addressed, please do just raise your hand. We will have a roving mic, and I will try to see you. So I think we will go ahead and start with some statements. I will. Yeah, you can have this if you want, or I can, or yeah. So just as an introduction, so I'm Brenna Hassett. I'm here on behalf of TrowelBlazers and also just myself. Right. So I will be chairing some of the more aggressive part of the session here with the help of Beth, Sykes, and Suzanne, Birch, who are also here. And then, so we unfortunately have some people who were not able to attend, one of whom is Hannah Cutler. And she's very kindly provided us a statement, which Becky has offered to read out while I put out some of the slides.
Okay, do I have to hold it?
Yeah, you don't have to hold the button down, just hold it close to you.
Yes, okay. So, yes, we invited Hannah to contribute. She is an archaeological officer and she specialises in Paleolithic Mesolithic. She works for Suffolk County Council and Art Control Service. And we asked Hannah to contribute because she's a trans woman, and we really wanted to make sure that trans people's perspectives and binary people's perspectives are included, because as many people might know, there are some slight issues in feminist circles about whether or not that's appropriate. We believe it is. So Hannah's statement reads: my background. Thank you for this opportunity to contribute. Apologies I cannot be with you. I'm currently an HER officer completing a project enhancing Paleolithic and Mesolithic records for Suffolk, funded by Historic England. I've been a development control officer, a site assistant, and a postgrad student. I transitioned almost a decade ago while undertaking my PhD at the University of Cambridge. When I went back to commercial digging post-PhD, I eventually ended up working for the same commercial field unit which I previously worked for. Therefore, my trans status was always known. My managers didn't need to bring it up because it wasn't relevant. The only time it was when I needed time off for surgery and light duties when I came back to work. I am treated no differently from any other member of my team, which is as it should be. This may have something to do with archaeologists generally being an amiable sort. Next section, bad experiences. Whilst I have not had that many bad experiences while working, I have a couple of examples which illustrate the type of things that can occur, either around the process of social or medical transition, but also for people for whom the big changes are behind them and are already getting on with their life and their career. So the first example, While studying, about a year or so after I transitioned, a kind librarian pointed out to me that despite my name change, the university library system always showed my old name to whoever was looking. Essentially, this was outing me every time without my consent to whoever looked at the system. Getting this changed was really complicated at the time, although I think it's improved since. Although I'd technically already done it through the central registration. There was no malice in this, it was just how the systems and bureaucracy had not been set up to deal with this kind of thing. Similar issues could be predicted in other organisations, and if they're noticed, then they should be dealt with quickly. Example number 2. Years later, while digging, I was talking with a colleague, and she mentioned, after I had brought up my transition, that a colleague who had since left, but who had known me before I transitioned, went around mentioning my trans status to all the newer staff. This kind of gossip was wrong, and no different to gossip about other sensitive subjects, and had I known at the time, I would have complained. Issues such as this, and bullying, can be covered by staff codes of conduct and procedures, depending on how severe they are. The Equalities Act of 2010 is the basis of anti-discrimination law and covers most of the bases. Staff can be educated to know what is inappropriate, so that hopefully a quick correction by a colleague informally prevents others being told and things escalating. Gender recognition. The Gender Recognition Act 2004 allows trans people to change their legal gender. The Act may or may not be reformed soon. Almost all gender marker and name changes do not require this, despite misinformed people thinking otherwise. In 2011, my university would not change my official gender marker without a gender recognition certificate, a GRC. Employers should not ask for a person's GRC, and it should never be a precondition for transitioning to work. It is illegal to ask. Without a GRC, this can be grounds to sue in civil court. With a GRC, outing is a criminal offence. For various reasons, gender recognition can be difficult to retain. It doesn't recognise non-binary people. I haven't bothered. I don't want to go on a government list of trans people and pay over £100 for the privilege of a faceless bureaucrat deciding whether I'm female. She has some tips for cisgender, which is non-transgender people, staff, colleagues, managers. Respect pronouns. Yes, this is a big deal. Don't out people without their consent. Experiences and thus needs do vary, so please speak to your trans employee. Mental health issues for transitioning people can be serious due to the stress associated with anxiety, difficulty getting medical help, etc. Be mindful. Trans women still experience sexism and misogyny. I never had my experience or qualifications questioned or were spoken over to at meetings like I have been since transitioning. Check your sources if you're creating procedures documentation. There are well-funded anti-trans groups, and they often publish guides, in inverted commas, which can on face value appear reasonable. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. There are numerous good guides out there, and she's provided some links for those so we can put those in the documentation. For example, when assisting Suffolk County Council HR department in writing a policy for trans employees, the HR team were all cisgender. They were worried because they said they had no idea how to deal with doing employee leave for surgery, as they thought it hadn't been dealt with. I told them that they had dealt with someone, which was me, and it was no different to other staff having time off for other medical reasons. Commercial archaeology. I can't think of too many things that trans women require that cis women don't also require that are specific to commercial archaeology. Field archaeology is no different for trans women. The only thing I can think of is gender presentation, which can be an issue for anyone at any time, but might be more pronounced at the start of transition. It can be hard to perform normative femininity wearing digging clothes and PPE. Presentation, whether normative or not, is irrelevant to how trans women should be treated and whether their gender is respected. And she's provided a number of links, guides for employees, toolkits and things, so we will make sure that those are provided when we put our resource together. So yeah, I'd just like to thank Hannah very much for providing her personal experience. And who's next? Yeah, Hannah Cutler.
So basically just like this.
Oh, sorry, yes, there's Hannah Cobb.
That's me.
And
I'm here.
And Hannah Cutler, who sadly could not make it today.
Yeah, there she is there.
So she's, sorry, at the bottom. Yes, so we do have some statements from Penny Foreman, but I think we might go actually to Hannah Cobb, who is, sort of can double up with the SIFA thing. So your presentation is on there.
And I'll read Hannah's one later, shall I?
Yeah, we can see how much we overlap. So, yes.
Oh, I might be really rubbish with a microphone. If I project, can you hear me? Do I need a microphone?
I think the microphone is better just in case anyone needs
Okay,
it.
fair enough. Is this...
So I am creeping around behind everyone, writing things on whiteboard in a menacing way. Please don't be menaced by that. That is what we're talking about in the second half of the section. So.
All right, so hello, I'm Hannah Cobb. I feel uncomfortable with a microphone in my hand. And also I chair the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists Equality and Diversity Group. So the challenge that I want to talk about very briefly is the big one, that inequality is embedded in the structures of our profession. Oh, I can also hear my own voice out there, it's horrible. Inequality is embedded in the structures of our profession. So here's a slide that I've already massively overused this tag, and in general, but basically is a quick summary about the ways in which structural inequality exists in the face of, as a result of harassment, discrimination, explicit and implicit inequalities, our profound lack of diversity as a profession, and the various barriers to entry and progression that we have. I want to give you a personal example of some of the structural inequality that exists. Here is a personal example from a student who did my course last year. They filled out their course unit information, course unit feedback to tell me this module was made much harder than it needed to be due to Hannah only working 3 days a week and only answering her emails on those days. I understand that Hannah has family commitments and large roles within and outside the university, and I don't blame her for that. But I do strongly believe that because of these commitments, she should not have been running the Doing Archaeology 2 course. Now, there's a lovely example of structural inequality because these forms feed into the promotion process. So that will be used if I ever make a promotion case. And also, if I don't run those, then I could never get promotion if I don't run courses. And this is a student, I'm sure, who probably regards themselves probably as a feminist and everything. I don't think I had a bunch of students who weren't woke. So this is how structural inequality is. And this is me just, a privileged white cis woman moaning, really. Other structural inequalities are much more serious. And I know we're just talking about women, but this is intersectional, the inequalities that exist across the profession. And that's just a few statistics. And so this is all really depressing and upsetting stuff. But I want to try and think of some positive things. Because it's tagged, I've put some quotes in from Rosie Braidotti, who says, despair is not a project, affirmation is. And also that anger and opposition are not enough. They need to be transformed into a power to act so as to become a constitutive force. This reflects the slides in the introduction. And I'm really grateful to be able to think through with you all some ways of doing this. The Equality and Diversity Group set about trying to do this in a series of different ways. And the thing that I think has been one of the most effective things in the long run was the cross-sector equality and diversity action meeting that we held in July last year. The British women archaeologists were there. There was people represented from across the sector, so people like the CEOs of Wessex and Oxford, so big commercial units, and Historic England were represented, and
local government and various third parties and academia as well. And what was brilliant in this meeting was Sarah May crystallising everything by giving an analogy that we need to have a culture change akin to the culture change that happened with health and safety, that happened 20 years ago, that we would never do anything bad health and safety-wise, and we certainly would report it, we would try not to, and the same thing must happen for equality and diversity. And out of that then came cross-sector consensus, which produced the UK Industry Group statement, which you can find on CIFA's website. It's a very small. The crucial thing is that Sarah May's change of culture has appeared here, and the really crucial thing, I think, is here, that our organisations will therefore publish programmes of work in line with these commitments, that people are ready to commit to take action in all of this. And that's great, because that gives us an open door to push across the sector for change. And so in the last month, the Equality and Diversity Group have sent, oops, no, what am I doing? Oh, where's my slide? I'll relocate my slide.
I think that was the previous version of the slides that were attached to my PowerPoint.
Ace.
Yes.
There we go. Right. We sent 10 suggested actions to diversify your workplace to all the registered organisations with CIFA. FAME are also going to send this out after they've been busy videoing everything here. And so this is going to go to all the registered organisations, all the members of FAME. So this is just 10 simple steps. There's a link, you can take a photo and look at them yourself if you want. I'm sorry I didn't print them out really and bring them with me. But this means that there's space for collective action. So, the key challenge is the structural nature of inequality. Actions to address this is culture change engendered by engaging the whole sector and pushing at the open door that the industry statement gives us. But one final thing, I think, is how can we push at that? And the crucial thing for me is through collective action, not homogenising ourselves, because we all do different things brilliantly and we should all have our different voices, but we should all work together to amplify those voices. And so we've begun a conversation about having an equalities collective for archaeology and heritage. I think we still need to have more conversations about how that will work, and we'll certainly hopefully have funding for that from CIFA for the first event, perhaps FAME for future things maybe. And Prospect, I think, seemed to think we'd put some funding in too. So hopefully we will have some more conversations about that, and if you're interested then please do feel free to get in touch if you would like to join that. So, in summary, the key challenge I see is the structural nature of inequality, and the actions that I think we can take to address this are culture change across the whole sector, engendered by engaging the whole sector, pushing at the open door that the industry statement gives us, and amplifying our voices and our activism through taking collective action, which I'm very pleased to be part of today.
Thank you. Our presenters were warned to keep their statements very brief, so thank you very much. I think, whoever wants to go up next.
I'll do a dance around the table. You go that way, I'll go this way.
I will move a chair because I'm standing at the whiteboard there. But yes, do you have your slides?
I don't have slides.
Oh, you don't have slides? Yes? Ha ha ha!
Made it easy, I don't have slides. So I'm Kayt Hawkins. I'm a member of the Badger Respect team. I'm also a fine specialist, pottery specialist at Archeology South East. And obviously the title of this session is Women and Power, and we're looking at the barriers to this in our sector, and I was thinking about women and power, and I was thinking, okay, I'm a woman, been working in commercial archaeology for 20 years or so. Do I have power? Do I think I have more power now than I had when I started 20 years ago? Initially I thought, yeah, I do. And then I thought, no, I don't. I have more confidence that I think has come with experience of realising that actually everybody I work with is insecure and all struggling to work in a system that doesn't really support the vast majority of us. And in particular, in conversations with Kat Rees, who's another member of the Badger Respect team, we were looking at our roles in archaeology and the gendering of roles within archaeology, within commercial archaeology. And she was talking about her partner who was kind of encouraged to go down a career route that wasn't necessarily the one of his choice, but the one that he was strongly advised to go down. And I was thinking as well about something Jenny Andrew from Prospect Union said this morning about the gendering of roles and the division that roots women away from positions of power. So I just want to sort of illustrate this point really by focusing on some of the recent conversations that have been involved with at conferences and both in the Respect and Mentoring Women in Archaeology and Heritage Facebook groups. Talking about the problems, and there are vast problems, we've heard a lot about at this conference with women trying to maintain a career in field archaeology, and after this morning's session on gender in archaeology as well, in commercial archaeology, it seems to be a pattern that is prevalent across the whole of Europe. Looking at how women, when women are talking about how can they maintain a career and family commitments in archaeology, one of the routes that's often touted is you need to find a specialism, do a specialism and go into post-ex. So as a fine specialist, I'm speaking as well from personal experience and this shared sense of frustration that's come out with colleagues recently. Earlier this year, Jane Evans gave a paper at the 30th CIFA Fines Group conference, and she traced the career trajectories of 3 women who all started in fines work in the late 1980s. Among many of the points that she raised was that post-ex, particularly fines, as I was saying, has long been touted as this obvious option if you want to combine career and family. But are we selling a false promise here to women? We've already heard about, I'm sure we will hear more about the lack of representation of women in senior roles. Yet we also know that more women are entering the profession, more women are entering at university level. And some of the stats that were up by Penny earlier, I think it was about 60% or something coming in to study archaeology. And then in Hannah's slide, we saw that at MIFA level, within CIFA, only 33% of women have MIFA level. And women are certainly overrepresented in these specialist posts. So there's a survey of archaeological specialists undertaken by Kenny Aitchinson, 2016-17. And that covers all archaeological specialisms, not just fine specialisms. And women there accounted for 55%. We did a survey of the CIFA Fines Group, and we found that it was around 65% or just over identified as female. So if we take that women's roles are often undervalued in general, our archaeological jobs dominated by women also paid less prestige within our profession, sort of form of not so unconscious bias within the workplace. And we were talking about this and we were thinking, when you start at the beginning at university, how often is it that the fines hut is often viewed as female? It's after all where the tea urn and the biscuits are located, but it's also where those who are too unwell or unruly to work on site are sent. So straight away, young archaeologists' first experience of site work is a kind of dismissive attitude already towards fines work. The emphasis being that field work is where it's at. And I've also worked, I think that attitude, sort of dismissive attitude, you see it carrying on in the commercial world, because I've certainly worked at organisations where site staff have actually preferred to take annual leave rather than go and work in fines when there's a lull in field work. You also have the working pattern of specialists, many of whom work part-time, and you've seen Hannah's comment about her 3-day week. And again, the specialist survey found that 1/3 of specialists work part-time. The Fines Group survey, we found again that was slightly higher. And I've spoken to a colleague before who, when she was on maternity leave as a part-time academic member of staff, I don't think employment law would allow this now, I hope not, but part of her hours were taken away while she was on maternity leave to create a full-time post. And when she questioned it, her senior male colleagues told her they had to advertise a full-time post to ensure they recruited somebody of suitable calibre. So, the perceptions of part-time work also plays into this. And also when you work part-time as a fine specialist, you're often told that you're not going to get the good sites necessarily. Expect the sort of the dribs and drabs and the smaller sites. And then that impacts on your publication record, but that's your key tool for proving your competency. There's also the stats from the archaeological surveys that show that in terms of charge-out rates, those areas populated by women are also the lowest. So in the survey of archaeological specialists, in the ranking of charge-out rates, finds work came in at 10th, and then it was illustration, and actually archives, which we know is another very female-dominated area, came in at the lowest with a charge-out rate of about £200 a day, I think. It also showed that male specialists on average are charged out at a higher rate of around £273 a day, female specialists around £217. And also if you work part-time, you're also going to be charged out at a lower rate. The correlation wasn't explicit in that report, but I suspect a lot of those part-time specialists are also female. And to come back to Jane's paper at the Finds Group conference, of those 3 women, one of the women left Finds work because she had a young family, and at the time she couldn't make it work, and it was just too complicated. But she still pines and she still misses, her engagement with archaeological finds. Another moved out of finds after a much more varied career that gave her the background to go into management. The third is still a find specialist. And I think that's part of the issue there if we're looking at taking women out, removing them from the routes that lead to management and power. When you go into a find specialism as well, you're often deemed as having too narrow experience to take on those bigger management roles. So, are we sort of tipping our women into a compromise by saying get a specialism so you can maintain this work-life balance, but at the same time, your career is maybe going to stop at that point. And for some women they're absolutely happy with that, but that's maybe not explicit, or that's not really understood at the time. I think there's a lot more that we can pull out of what I've just been saying, but I obviously want to condense it and keep it short. So I suppose the question is, do we need to spend some time critically examining the importance and the value we place on different areas within the profession, sort of properly evaluate this gendering of roles and look at that in, the structural inequalities, and basically that's my question to you for the discussion later. Okay?
You're in about it, all right? Rachel, are you and Anne giving a statement together or separate?
Fielding this one, and Anne will chime in, I think. Yeah.
All right. So I think actually we'll do Penelope Foreman's, and then let you. Now that you're out of your chair. Because we have two statements actually from Penelope Foreman, who wasn't able to be here, and as part of CSIC, I think Hannah Cobb will read one, and then as part of Enabled Archaeology. Wait, who's got which one?
Enabled.
Yeah. Which one would you like to read?
Well, I'm with Trustee.
All right. So there we go. So sorry, Hannah has Enabled Archaeology, and Susie has the Women in Community Archaeology. So Susie, if you want to start, and then Hannah will go.
All right.
The slides.
All right.
Mic. Oh, you want the mic? Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, so yes, this is on behalf of Penelope Foreman, and so she's writing this paper from her perspective as a community archaeologist working in Wales on projects that are largely grant aid funded by CADU, a function of the Welsh government, and she wants to say that this is not representative of all community archaeologists, but that the fragmented and loose collection of skills and roles that come under community and public archaeology means defining what we do as a difficult act in itself. And I'll just read from here. As a woman in community archaeology, I am, for once, not in a minority. Anecdotally, from experience in meetings, conferences, and networking with peers, those involved in the discipline are overwhelmingly female or female identifying. This has led to some positives. No other time in my academic or professional career have I had such productive, positive, and constructive meetings and support. But as I will describe, it has also had significant drawbacks which impact on archaeology as a discipline, the communities we work with, and the professional and personal lives of community archaeologists. Our discipline is still plagued by dismissal from some quarters within archaeology as not proper archaeology, because we don't dig full-time, we don't teach solely at graduate level and above, and we don't write enough papers or contribute to enough research proposals.
Our core skills are written off as soft: people skills, communication, negotiation, diplomacy. All very women's work: coordinating volunteers, organizing facilities, engaging families, and speaking to diverse but generally non-specialist audiences. And yet, community archaeology is at the very forefront of what archaeology should be absolutely focusing on in order to ensure its survival, studying the effects of archaeology on community and an individual well-being, looking at social and economic impacts of our work on the regions we work in, establishing how archaeology and heritage feed into placemaking, identity construction, and other contemporary social issues. It's the perfect testing ground for decolonizing work that must happen to keep archaeology relevant, engaging, and importantly, more inclusive and accessible. Without work to engage and educate the public, how will future generations want to become archaeologists, want to support heritage projects, and want to influence policy and practice when they are in power or in the workforce in 5, 10, and 20 years' time? The discipline falls into being institutionalized, that is governed by demands of legislation or policy that leads to demands of funders and partnership organizations. So it's about time the role of community archaeology within this framework is recognized. Secondly, community archaeologists also end up doing emotional labor and overtime in a way that is very different, but parallel to similar demands upon others within commercial and academic departments. Community archaeologists are expected, and often required to by project designs, to work with individuals that are vulnerable or who have current physical or mental health issues or who are socially isolated. All of these people benefit incredibly from archaeology, but working with them requires a significant skill set and takes an emotional toll that I can guarantee very few community archaeologists are trained to deal with in any substantial way. Though some workplaces offer mental health first aid training, this is but a sticking plaster on what will become a more significant problem as more and more projects are framed as a way to tackle social and well-being issues as their core outcome. These both feed into a very core issue: poorly paid roles and a lack of progression. Without a recognized definition of what community archaeology is and does, it does not get professional recognition required to establish pay grades or promotion routes. When opportunities are few and departments are small, there are very limited options for moving up, leaving women stagnated in low pay grade roles because it is rewarding and interesting and good work, but not professionally recognized enough to push CIFA and command rates of according pay. Solutions: there is some light. The CIFA Voluntary and Community Group have been working on both analysis of community archaeologists and related roles to construct both industry standards for what these jobs should require and for what pay grades they should offer. Haley Pryor has been doing excellent work on this, and we hope to release findings early in 2020. We are also in the final stages of editing new competency matrix for community archaeology, which again will go into press in the first half of 2020, which, even if you're not a CIFA member, will provide an excellent way to plan CPD, evaluate your current roles, opportunities, and drawbacks, and where to focus in order to push for more recognition of your hard and vital work. I would also implore anyone working in community archaeology to publish as much as possible and open access where feasible to get as much of our work cited and into the cycle of impact. Finally, share the work of your peers and colleagues, give people a signal boost inside and outside of the standard journals and publications. Sometimes a chink of recognition is all it takes to boost morale enough to keep going. So that's on behalf of Penelope Foreman. Say it again. Thank you.
Yeah, we will hear from Penelope again, but with a different hat on.
Yeah, it's a shame that Penny can't be here because she's awesome as well. Okay, so this is Penny's statement about enabled women in archaeology. And this is all very meta. She started with I want to start this paper saying that while I was very honoured to be invited to speak about the issues facing enabled women in archaeology, I want to make it very clear that I speak from my own experience only, and that I'm not one of the trustees or board of the AF. Just to now step out for a second, I am Hannah Cobb, one of the trustees of the AF, so I can answer some questions to it later on. But Penny was giving this, and it's Penny's voice that I'm speaking in. Penny says, every enabled archaeologist has a different lived experience, has different challenges, different triumphs, and different ways of being an archaeologist. I want to give an overview of some of the main issues and some ways I feel action can be taken. Teresa O'Mahony is a woman who should be on this panel right now. She was there for me when I had my diagnosis last year, and she was there for all of us in her tireless and determined fight to drag archaeology into a more inclusive, less discriminatory discipline. I will attempt to convey a fraction of her energy here. So, I'll start by saying that the way disability or health issues is framed in discourse around access to archaeology is heavily medicalised. What I mean by the medical versus social model is this. The medical model states that this is a condition that limits a person's access to archaeology. The social model states that it is society's attitudes towards and treatment of us is what limits us. What the EAF and Theresa knew painfully well is that we need to move towards the social model to effect real change. The discipline needs to take responsibility, hold up its hands to the way it overtly and covertly discriminated against enabled archaeologists, and take steps to removing barriers to participation. Though we recognise this need, we are held back by the fear. Fear I have given a capital F because it's overwhelming and multifaceted and something I think unifies us as enabled archaeologists. It's fear of the reaction of our colleagues and peers and volunteers when they know about our health status or about our diagnoses or when our necessary accommodations. It's the fear of taking a day off, even when our bodies are at the very limit, because the next competency hearing could see us unemployed in a very frightening economic world. It's fear of even disclosing our health when we apply for a job or receive a diagnosis, because it could put us out of the running and tribunals are expensive to bring to bear. It's the fear of our own bodies not being capable tomorrow of what they could do today. It's the fear of admitting that. It's the fear that one day we won't be able to carry on. And where do we go from here? With the loss of Theresa, we lost our anchor in the world, and that is true. The EAF endures, but I am sure I'm not alone in thinking we don't have that focus point of strength and power that she embodied. So for my first solution, I implore you not to let her work be abandoned. Volunteer to keep EAF's work going, to get the projects Theresa began and fought so hard for the support and recognition they deserve. Donate if you are able, time or money, and share their work as much as possible. Sessions like this one often leave you with a drive to do something, so let this be your something. With that in mind, I come to my next point, the need for challenge. This point will make certain sectors of our discipline uncomfortable, may even result in responses that are angry and dismissive, because people do not like to be called out on their privilege or the status quo that benefits them. In quotation marks, when you are accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. Close quotation. Challenge your workplace, institution, department. Don't just write an access statement that says, we tried around, didn't work, at least we tried. Ask how they consulted with enabled individuals. Ask what consultants they've employed to do this, rather than relying on the free labour of enabled individuals. Ask what adjustments they'll be making this year, next year, over the next 3 years. Ask how they make accommodations for neurodiverse individuals in the field. Ask where their fridge for medication is. Ask where their nearest changing place is accessible bathroom on campuses. Ask where the quiet space is. Don't let up and don't let people off the hook. 20 years ago, putting in a ramp into a university department was almost revolutionary. Now it's simply not good enough. Along similar lines, I also implore you to help normalise enabled archaeologists. When I use the word normalise, I mean in the sense that it becomes not something to note or be surprised about when enabled archaeologists are in the field or speaking at a conference, or that application forms asks for access requirements, or that equipment is available to make volunteering or working on site accessible to as broad a range of people as possible. If you feel able, share your experiences, the good, the bad and the ugly, so other people going through the same know they are not alone. Let people within and without the discipline see that the different ways enabled archaeologists experience archaeology. Let conversations be had that can be difficult, can be challenging, but above all can inform and educate and spark change. If you don't feel able to share, and you absolutely never should feel obligated to do so, boost the voices of others that are telling their stories. If you are in a position of privilege and influence, use it. Get the voices of enabled archaeologists out there and help us defeat the fear. That's Penny. It was okay, just really quickly to say, if people want to read more about Theresa, there's a memory board board at the entrance of where the coffee is.
Do you want to just briefly explain to Teresa about Enabled Archaeology for people who may not know in the room?
Teresa founded the Enabled Archaeology Foundation, and it really exists at the moment as the Enabled Archaeology Group on Facebook. I think it's a closed group, but it's there to join in and provide support. The Enabled Archaeology Foundation was in the process of formalising and actualising Teresa's ambitions at the point where she died. So we as trustees are in the process of talking about how we move forward. And so it's one of these kind of watch this spaces in terms of us communicating what it needs. What it needs is to have this much Teresa, really, unfortunately, because she was an absolute powerhouse and she took no nonsense and she was ready to put herself out there and fight these fights. So it needs another Teresa. So if anyone else wants to step into those massive shoes, then that would be really amazing. So we'll communicate that and
Thanks very much, Matt. So I think now we have the chance to hear from Rachel Peck. Do you want both mics? We do have 2 mics. There's a second mic near where your slides are.
Wow.
Hopefully.
Okay, can you all hear me? I've got a bit of a sexy voice on today. Alright, so Anne and I constitute BWA. We have been kicking around since 2008. We've been spending a lot of time talking about these things. We're now collaborating with Respect. We help with the Respect group on Facebook, which is a support network. We're now in the process of, we've got the Mentoring Women in Archaeology and Heritage group, who are like the young, slightly less jaded version of ourselves, slightly more positive in outlook, which is great. But we're very much, we've been very keen to ensure collective working around these issues, because we realised back in 2008 that actually the scope of this problem is such that it can't be tackled by a few individuals. This is about sector change, it's about culture change, and we need everybody involved. Okay, so hopefully we'll put some things on that whiteboard for you, okay?
Ready.
All right, so 2012, 2013, profiling the profession, the last profiling the profession. We haven't had that since this point. We're very keen to ensure that that comes back. That gave us the figures that 46% of archaeology at that point was female, and it's projected that at the same rate by 2017-18 we would be predominantly female as a sector. So we've been the fastest growing employee group within this sector for the last probably 10, 15 years, something of that nature. The question is, can we retain young women? The 6 points that we're going to work through that BWA sort of coalesced around as the problems, if you like, and then towards the end of this I'll talk about what we think the action points need to be. In 2010 we ran off one of our surveys. We found that 1 in 2 women had experienced workplace sexism. About 1 in 3 seems to be the figure that ends up being central to all this. In 2014, Clancy et al., their figure was 40%. So there's somewhere in between 30-40% of all women are hearing inappropriate comments, dealing with workplace sexism. So we're starting to get the data through now from a variety of places that is supporting what we all feel on an individual basis. It's no longer simply, anecdotal. This is data driven. knowledge now. Of the 1 and 2 who had experienced workplace sexism, only 8% saw resolution. Only 16% reported, and this is something that we heard this morning from Jenny Andrew, who, we're not reporting. We're in a sector that is in such a state of crisis around these issues, actually, that we cannot expect people who are dealing with these issues to actually report them within the sector itself. Because we don't have a sector that's dealing with this. We have actually a failing system in this regard currently. We've now got a situation where our first legal case is in the courts around sexual assault at the University of Cambridge on an archaeological field course. That's great, isn't it? Good promotional material for our sector. In 2019, BWA put itself forward as the place where the Me Too generation could come and report this stuff. We didn't intend to have a database. We've got a database because I couldn't actually physically retain all of the cases that came forward. Within a year, this year, we've got 50 plus instances reported. Some are historic. I've now actually got women in their 60s coming forward to report historic cases of sexual assault and sexual harassment in the field. Some of these cases are very serious indeed. We think that this should be dealt with within the professional forum. It's not actually my job to be dealing with this stuff. I'm doing it because there's a gap professionally here. We are starting to talk about resource around harassment and assault. We've got the fantastic Badger Respect Guide, which is out there doing really good stuff. CIFA, I did talk with CIFA representative last week and started to throw around ideas around toolbox talks, induction sessions. Hannah's brilliant, 10-point plan, how to diversify the workplace. There's movement there, isn't there? But I think what we're all talking about is us equipping field staff with the tools, with the knowledge that's going to help them deal with instances of sexism, not assault, but sexism in the field in the moment it happens. So we all need to skill up. We need to be challenging those behaviours because it's a spectrum of behaviour. And if we can challenge the stuff at this end, there'll be less of the stuff at this end. And I think we'd all like to see that. Okay, so number 2, workplace harassment and assault. 2 different things actually, okay? And we need to start separating these things out. Number 3, the economics of parenting. Huge, absolutely huge. We as a sector really have to start dealing with this issue because we are losing some of our best archaeologists around this subject, okay? Just looking at this graph here, 2 different surveys of ours, 2008, 2016. It's reducing, 90+% in 2008 said that this was predominantly faced by women. It's shifting slightly, but it is still largely a women's issue, and there's no need for this to be a women's issue. The problem that we have is that in a society that isn't providing costs for childcare, it's always the less well-paid member of a heterosexual partnership who takes the fall for parenting. So we have a situation where the woman sacrifices her career because of the gender pay gap. Right, isn't it? So you fuck this way, you fuck that way. Anyway, whatever. The sex probably wasn't that good in the first place. Right, career of family. So this is number 4. This is separate. Again, this is the mechanics of parenting. Okay? So the fact that we are in a mobile sector, we are largely moving between contracts, perhaps moving between units on a seasonal basis sometimes. This is really, really difficult. 72% of the women that we spoke to in 2010 had no parent responsibilities. So we're self-selecting. The women in the sector aren't carers because we are not providing space for carers within our sector. 47% in 2010 believed they could not have a family and remain in archaeology. That's 1 in 2. 1 in 2 young women think, I'm going to have to choose. I'm going to have to choose between the career I'm trained for and a family. It's not good enough, man. I have had to choose. I haven't had to choose. You know, this is really bad. I can't underline how far behind we are as a sector on basic, you know, rights and provisions around this stuff. So what do we end up with? We've got a sector skills drain. Why are we bothering to train women in the first place if we're just going to kick them out when they get pregnant, effectively? What's the point? I mean, let's just not bother training women. Let's be bold about it.
And in fact, if I can just interject, can I get the mic?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, when we started doing these presentations, when we got the first lot of data, when the tuition fees were only £1,000, we were talking about it being theft. That it's effectively theft to get women in, to get them to imagine that they can do this. Now, with the costs that are involved in getting a first degree of, you know, £40,000 to £50,000, things that they're never going to repay that, they're never going to get the skills or the salary. It's really quite appalling on the economics. Anyway.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was number 4, mechanics of parenting, childcare, that sort of stuff. Number 5, we've got an issue around promotion. The fact that promotion is gendered in our sector. Okay? Now, the first thing we need to recognise is that promotion is not about performance anymore, if it ever was. It's not about qualifications, it's not about ability, it's about potential, and it's about characters that are perceived to be leadership qualities, okay? But it's not actually related to ability. So once you put your head around that, it makes life a lot easier. Just some basic stats there. I mean, we've got a lot of data on this in the academic sector. We are starting to ask for this data in the contract sector as well. 2010, 2016, has your sex had an impact on employment status or salary level? Does your sex affect promotion? Again, 1 in 3 women believe that their sex is directly related to promotion processes and their inability to progress as rapidly as contemporary, similarly skilled male peers. Number 6, the pay gap. Obviously this isn't restricted to archaeology, but it is a major problem when we're already dealing with a low wage sector, mobility of contracts, all that sort of stuff. We're talking serious amounts of money here, you know? And it's not just a pay gap, it's a savings gap, it's a pension gap, it's a leisure gap. This is what affects our everyday life. And you know, the Equal Pay Act was 1970.
The year I was born.
Yeah. So that worked. Economics and equity, sorry, did you see why we were jaded? Economics and equity. You know, this is not a women's problem. This is a sector problem, this is a professional problem, and I am fed up with it falling to the women in the sector to have to deal with this. We're not going to do this anymore. This has got to be taken on by the institutions, and it's got to be taken on now. Economically, it makes sense to have a sector that doesn't kick out half its best people 5 years after they've entered, 6 years after they've entered. Which other sector thinks that that's a solid economic strategy? Like, honestly, it's hilarious, really. Right, so that's all the problems. Lots of problems, lots of problems. Action. 1, we have to tackle the institutional sexism of our workplaces. This is a cultural problem and it can be changed. And we have to provide the skills and resources within the workplaces to ensure that that happens. And we will get to a zero tolerance on workplace sexism. We will achieve that, and we're going to do it quite soon. We need to be training our managers to rethink things like work-life balance and the impact that parenting has in the workplace and how we structure our workplaces around that. Active mentoring of women's staff, CIFA have suggested this could be a place that they step in. We've also got the biggest question about monitoring and enforcing this stuff. And this is something that we're all talking about, we're all having conversations about. Literally, over the past couple of weeks, this has really ramped up in pace. So these conversations are happening at quite high levels at the moment. It is starting to change. So tackling the institutional sexism. Secondly, survivor reporting and support that currently sits with BWA in Respect. We want to see that move across to the professional sector. I don't think it's going to sit with CIFA, but that's something that's in transition. We need to be thinking about how we as a sector deal with what is a crisis of sexual harassment in our fields. And it's not up to a voluntary women's group to be doing that shit. Right? Number 3, economics, mechanics of parenting. We need to be talking about part-time work, flexible working strategies. I think Sadie Watson's having some really good strategic ideas about that. We're not talking about this. I think what Jenny actually said this morning, that we can't tinker around the edges with this stuff. Okay, what we as a collective group of people are now talking about is actually quite important, quite radical change within the sector. That's what we're looking to. We're done. We've been saying this for a decade now. We're fed up saying it. This has got to be now radical change, central change. For transparent pay and promotion structures, so this is probably slightly more research-based, trying to work out the role, qualifications, contract type, that sort of stuff, and work out where the problems in the discipline sit so that we can have a data-led strategy around tackling those. And perhaps some proactive equality strategies in line with the Gender Equality Charter mark so that there's a motivation for the companies to actually make sure this happens. We lobbied CIFA on this in 2015, hoping that they would take a leadership role in some of this stuff. I think it's becoming apparent, really, that that's not going to be possible. That's fine. It's going to happen anyway. We're talking about things like the data gathering exercise, so profiling the profession. We need that to be front and centre, really. The fact that we've let that slip is really quite disturbing at this point in time, especially after Me Too. Mandatory responses from units, establishing standards, providing resource, monitoring, policing, enforcing. So we know what needs to happen. It's just actually ensuring that it does now. One very simple issue. We need to end the skills drain by tackling paying conditions and gender equity. And that's actually been the case since the 1990s. CIFA and the wider sector, we've actually known about that since the 1990s. This isn't new stuff. It's been around for an awfully long time. It's just, I think now we're at a point where we're going to start asking permission for change. We're just going to make sure that change happens. Okay, that's us.
I was extremely together. Rachel was told very firmly about the number of slides, and then I totally forgot to even count them. So obviously that was well worth the time. Well, thank you very much to everyone who's provided a statement and who has read the statements we have. What we're going to do now is actually just break. What time are we at? Yeah, so we'll come back at 4. So about 15 minutes. Obviously, we won't actually start at 4 because we're never going to start on time. But in that time, the organisers are going to come up with some targeted questions, which are going to be for the panel, and this will hopefully form the basis of what we hope is the action document that we really would like to come out of this, because Rachel can't give this presentation every week. Apparently, she's busy. Some stupid archaeology thing or something. I don't know. What is it?
Some bloody crazy
Yes,
I'm
nobody
going
knows
out
what it
with
is.
Historic Society, actually. You need to do that.
Yeah, archaeology. So thank you very much, and when we come back, we will really hope to have some more comments from the audience, sort of as we go through these points. So please do come back and contribute. Just flash your hand up, and we will talk.
I didn't even notice. I was yeah, kind of spread out a little. Now look at that.
Is this in your way?
No, don't worry about that stuff.
Alright. Grab this.
So keep it
So I just wanted to get me and Becky started slightly opposite end or anything. You're gonna ask the question. I'm gonna ask the question. You're gonna ask the question. I mean, I don't know how you want to phrase it.
Wait, so do you want to leave these together here?
I mean, it's just basically to bring everyone to the I mean, that was sort of stuff for
I mean,
all right. So, is this? I'm just gonna put it for people's benefit so they can see who's talking with the Twitter handles. It doesn't have to be on the screen. It's literally just one slide. Like, nobody needs to see it. Do I need to hit a button?
Sorry.
Sorry.
There you go.
Okay, all right. Just to say, for this last part of the session, we are live streaming, so if anyone in the audience does not wish to be recorded, we will cut the live stream. So I think you may need to signal that to the lovely human being who will come over with a microphone. You don't have to out yourself now, though. So we're also going to start recording there. Where is my lovely tag parent? Cecilia, that's nominated. Right, okay, so we only have an hour left to solve all of the issues in all of the world. I think we can do it. So I think we should try this. We have the unique opportunity to try. So let's do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of summarize a couple of the problems and a couple of the actions that I think went with those. And I'd just like to go around and get a response in a sort of like 1 to 2 minute range, unless you need to say something, just on each point. And that, I hope, is going to be the backbone of the structure for the document we're talking about. We will all get a chance to talk about this later without the live audience. But, so the first point is I think this issue of gendered working and gendered roles. This seems to be key to a lot of issues in terms of representation in senior roles, in terms of pay equity and the perception of things like part-time. We talked about emotional labor and stuff like community archaeology, and we talked about the soft skills that, by the way, no one pays for. The fact that all of us are doing all of this, and not all of us are paid to do this, turns out. And then we turn to the actions that I think went with some of those problems, and those were basically, how do we deal with this gendered division of roles within archaeology? And we had suggestions of basically monitoring, keeping an eye on the data, a data-led approach, also mentoring, and then we had a great suggestion from Jess from Prospect, who unfortunately had to leave, but which is also to know your rights, is to understand your legal rights in working and to myth bust. This perception that people have that you cannot be a parent in archaeology is pretty bad. So the first thing I'd like people to just give us, what is the most important thing we can do to address gendered roles in archaeology? And I'm actually just going to pass the mic down, and I'd like everyone to take 1 to 2 minutes to kind of just give us what do we need to do about this. Yeah, Becky, did you want to come in on this, or shall we go straight to Susie?
Well, I'll pass it along as well.
Okay. Yesterday I ran a post-human feminist session, and in that we talked about this. Actually, we were talking about it in relation to prehistory, that's just as relevant to contemporary practice. We were talking about how Ben Jervis was talking about women's labour, medieval women's labour being classified as bywork, and yet it was fundamental to proper equality society. And there was a paper about Vikings, and she was saying Vikings are like these seafaring men, but who was making sails to the west. So there was that kind of narrative. And I think maybe we could be informed by that kind of thing, recentering the importance of these acts. Finds work. And this goes back to the Joan Giro paper, the women home ideology. We need to sort of recenter, reframe the way we talk about those kind of tasks as being central. We can't complete the archaeological process without finds work. It's fundamental. And on that note.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's also awareness within the profession that this is actually what's happening, because I think you go into your career and you don't. I'm quite horrified that it's taken me a while to realise that I'm actually inadvertently probably being complicit in encouraging more women, thinking I was helping by encouraging them to go into these, the gender roles, go into finds work and find specialisms, housekeeping, without actually realising that's what I was doing. So, it's raising awareness within the profession, and it doesn't just happen to women either. Quite often, I know of men who would quite like to have gone into finds work on site, but they've always been encouraged to go and do the heavy work. Oh no, we need you on site, and so they get pushed in one direction, and women get pushed in another direction, and you don't always at the time realise that that's what's happening. So I think just raising awareness and talking about it outside of conferences like this, a lot of commercial archaeologists probably don't come to conferences like this. So awareness and talking about it more.
From my perspective, the way beyond the gender roles is to remove the barriers to equality. So that would be maternity rights and the structure of our working practices, so that we can be parents as well as archaeologists. And I think that one thing will open up things to everybody.
I think the other thing that we can do is amplify the role of the specialists and the female gender roles in archaeology, which is including the soft skills. And maybe we can take that into our workplaces in terms of challenging who's mentioned in publications, who's seen as being contributing to that. If we see projects going forward that are mainly male dominated, again, challenge that at the time and suggest people that might be involved. Because I think that one thing we have also talked about is perhaps women waiting to be asked instead of putting themselves forward. And it's very difficult when you're suffering with rejection and all the other things that many of us do. But actually, if other people can highlight it and speak for those issues, then I think that we can get better representation across archaeology as a whole.
Yeah, so I think what we need to do is start at the roots of where the perceptions come in, which I think for a lot of people is actually when you're an undergraduate. Because no matter which sector you end up in, most people begin as students these days. You don't sort of just go straight into commercial archaeology, you do begin. And so I think it would be worth considering ways that explicit deconstruction of gendered career roles are actually made part of the teaching that goes on in the universities as a baseline point, and that is, I mean, people make an effort already certain people make an effort to have more of a representation on their reading lists and things like this, but I think actually it has to be explicitly discussed in terms of careers. I don't know what sort of the typical undergraduate experience is in terms of career talks or what happens in the departments. Perhaps that's something we need to start actually doing. That's a mandatory part of being an undergraduate, is you learn what the state of the profession is. Not to scare people, but like, you know, what are the options? How do we talk about things? And ask them what they think.
Yes, just really quickly, this is an anecdote on that. So I'm from the University of Manchester, and we do lots of career things, and we've got placements, blah, 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 all those things, and we do career talks, and obviously there's an equality and diversity issue to it all, so that's all great. So we brought some people in from sort of big units to do talks about, you know, commercial work, and then they also did kind of like little interviews for third years and master's students to then, you know, and wanted to, you know, they could submit their CVs and potentially get a job. So, an amazing field archaeologist, who is a person who's now an amazing field archaeologist and as a student was an amazing field archaeologist, always an amazing field archaeologist. She went into the interview, and she's quite slim and willowy and pale, and it was just the person from the unit and her, and he said to her, "It is going to involve doing lots of heavy work. Do you think you can pick up my bag? If you can carry my bag, then you can carry a total station." Let me tell you, this was 2 years ago, not like in the 1970s. So there's also those kind of recruitment drives probably need a little bit of work too. That's an anecdote for you all.
Well, that was mildly depressing. Would anyone from the audience like to come in with any points on that? Any comments there? There. Okay. Apparently gender roles not a huge one. Yeah. So I think, you know, one of the I'm adding an add-on to my original question. Where is this enforced? So Becky has given us at the university level when you're teaching and training the next generation. But Hannah's then brought up the fact that you know, even in this situation, the best will in the world, you know, there are people from units coming in who may not have had this helpful training in not judging whether women can do the work or not. Where is the place that we need to be focusing our efforts on to affect? So I know Rachel had another take entirely, which is actually it just needs to be absolutely down the line, the equalities law that we need to be aware of working practice. So I'd just like to go around actually very quickly and just see if everyone thinks it is the training or the teaching, or if this is something that is an employment practice issue, and if so, where do we look at that? Is it university or is it in the unit? So I'm just going to run the mic really quickly back down.
I said I think it has to start at the beginning. I actually would like to say that societies can also play a role in this as well, and obviously being the only, well, second American on this panel, but sort of representing, I'm on the committee for the status of women in archaeology for the Society for American Archaeology, but we just don't see even these sorts of panels, and I think widespread sort of professional discussion of these issues, like, you know, well, we don't even have a union, so like Prospector, you know, CIFA, sort of bodies like that, that are maybe kind of considering these issues. And so I think the fact that these sort of fora exist here is really excellent. I think it is a part of the duty of professional societies to also be proactive in this, because that's actually where a lot of graduate students that are maybe considering professional careers, or, you know, sort of a variety of careers, are also getting a lot of social cues and sort of making decisions about their careers. And so I think it's also, you know, important to think about societal kind of representation or messaging as well.
I think everyone has to do something. I think, like I said in my introduction piece, it's a cross-sector issue. Everyone has to, we still talk about specifically about like sort of challenging gender roles. Everyone has to be in that, otherwise it doesn't work. So that's my ambitious point. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm back here as well. I agree that it needs to start at university, but I think we also need to be careful how we, you know, I think we ought to have these discussions with students about, you know, careers in archaeology and the issues. And one of the things that came out this morning was a student saying how terrifying and depressing it all sounds, and why are they even thinking of entering the profession in the first place. And that's not the message either that we want to be giving out. So I think we need to think carefully about how we frame these discussions and be realistic, but also, you know, stress the positives as well.
I think there are two unique places. One is the university, because we know that university training excavation is a flashpoint. But for me personally, you know, I ran field school, then students will go out into the professional sector, and their first interactions with that, they're leaving. Or they last, if they manage to last, they last a couple of years and they're leaving. So for me, actually, I think the energy, the effort, from my perspective, from our perspective as BWA, is about creating a profession. And actually, it's professional practice that we see. You know, one of our talks was, are we a profession yet? And I don't think we are. So that would be where the energy would come from me.
Hi, and just to add on to that, I think that we do want to empower students with the knowledge that they might have to fight when they go into commercial practice to have these, to be treated equally, whether they're female or, again, whether they're enabled, or, you know, the experiences from Hannah and also from Penny, the other Hannah, earlier. But I think the other thing that we probably need to educate units and employers is that they're going to get sued. I mean, it really is illegal, and we are starting to see that, you know, we're now becoming litigious, and that is, it's only a matter of time before we start to see that happening in the workplaces. So this isn't just a wish list, this is actual illegal practices that, you know, that kind of interview that your student had is exactly the kind of thing that could end up in court. But we can say this tomorrow.
Here we go again. The happy end to her story is that she never worked for that company, and other companies have had her wonderful, amazing wonderfulness, so that's good. Yeah, just to add as well, like, you know, obviously with my
Stephen, a hat on, you know, a professional body should be at the heart of all of this professionalism. I know that there's, as Rachel raised, there needs to be leadership, and I don't think we're there yet, we're right, but a professional body is the place to set the standards for professionalism. That's what we in the Advisory Council Working Party are working for.
It's kind of, well, I had a final comment for that, but it does link into the next broad theme that came out of the presentations earlier. So clearly what's happening right now is that there's collective action, and the energy to move things and effect change is real right now. And there was some interesting commonality in the idea of having horizontal power structures. That was in the film as well at the beginning, and you know, people staying in their autonomous zones of what they do, but using the collective action, and that is exactly what today is about. And I think one of those things that collectively our voices could perhaps effect change links to all these things that people have just suggested as ways to help with the basic issue about gendered working conditions and everything, is how as a collective group are we going to essentially ensure somebody gives us some money to do this, because all of the ideas of nice careers programs and perhaps having a legal fund for people who do want to sue operated by a professional body, this all is going to cost money, and until the cash is regarded by those in positions of power as worth spending on this, I can't see that actually there's going to be dramatic shifts other than requiring people to do it voluntarily, as has always been.
Just as it goes past me, and I'll just quickly say that from like, yes, I'm internally have been asking CIFA for this, and certainly with the Equalities Collective, we can use an event, budget and event organising to run that, and we budget, we can also work, bring those kind of funds in. Those aren't specific funds to fund the Equalities Collective, but that's a start, and it's a push in the right direction. And there may well be funds forthcoming from other places. So say you were talking about potential funding from Prospect, and I think FAME are keen to contribute as well. Although I don't feel it's my place to say it, but I think that they're willing to contribute. Is that okay to say it? FAME are willing to contribute, very keen to contribute money. And I think that based on doing more research and being able to put funds in. So that's three sort of powerful bodies, and I think those are kind of starting points that we can build on. And I think particularly the support of FAME is really important, because I think when other companies see that, and then they've got to step up.
So the same thing really, that we are saying this as a collective of women, but actually there is a desire now from the broader sector to, they've started to realise that this stuff's pretty serious, and there is actually a desire for change from quite a few of the big institutions now. We can also add to that Society of Antiquaries is undergoing some quite radical change currently as a result of some things that have been kicking off in the last couple of years, and CBA obviously. So as a sector, the institutions have recognised that this is actually an issue and want to do something about it, and actually the most proactive are the big employers. So we have the strategy, we understand what's happening, we know what needs to happen, the employers are there with cash. The question of leadership is vaguely important, but I think really now we just need to get on with it.
And I think we have a question.
We have two.
Two. All right. Yep.
So I was really glad that the professional side of it comes up, because it's so often at conferences only the academic side comes up. But I wanted to talk about societies for a minute.
Quick question. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. I think one of the biggest problems with bringing up societies at this level is that most ECR women and most women in general in the field are actively being pushed out of societies at this point. Like we saw with the SAAs this year, that was an absolute fucking trash fire. Sorry, I know that's on film, but it was. There's no other nice way to say it. I already said it. That's not the first step on the session. It's fine. And so the biggest comment, so I was one of the people that was involved in the bylaws change for the SAA thing. That is still an ongoing trash fire. Great way to start my PhD. The only reason we had anything done at all was because we actively sent them harassing emails for them to answer us. And some of the most consistent comments we got when we had people signing things and responding to us about our language or our bylaws change were that basically unanimously ECR women no longer want to go to big conferences. And you're seeing this push of the younger side of the field, especially female, especially other minority populations, towards small niche conferences. And while that may help where you study geographically, like I felt very safe going to CERFA, and I feel very safe on the SCAR for people, but I don't think I'll be going to the SAAs for different reasons. And I even feel uncomfortable with the idea of going to WAC, because a few years ago at WAC, I brought up, how to put this nicely, I brought up including disabled people in minority statuses for the lower fee, and their response was that I didn't look disabled. That was basically their response. My friend wouldn't tell me the rest of what they said because apparently that was the only polite part. So I think part of what we need to keep in consideration with, I think it's very important, and the board, not board, but people you sit with, the group on, is one of the only nice parts of the essay is left. But I think we need to also consider that we might not have that macro access anymore to people going forward, because people are gravitating more towards things like CAA, towards, which I mean the computational meetings, not Canadian, just because there are Canadians around, and things like the frameworks, which Scotland does very well, and things like TAG, and just considering what we can do on a micro level that can reach the macro, because I do think we are going to see even more of a shift as we go forward away from ECRs feeling safe in those spaces.
I do want to respond to that really quickly, if I can, Mike, because I agree, and you know, I'll say I've been on that committee. This is just my first. This past essay was my first year on that committee, and you know, I mean, we could anyway. I don't want to get bogged into details on you know, some of the possibilities, but also maybe setbacks or constraints that committee has. But in terms of thinking about that, you know, you're saying that you feel uncomfortable going to a large conference like that. I similarly, I mean, I'm not going this year, but I think that also goes to show that this is a big problem, because that is where a lot of this networking and a lot of this higher level, you know, sort of if you're not showing your face there, then who are you? So maybe you are going to these smaller conferences and you are getting a lot out of it, and certainly there's a lot more community feeling, but then at the same time, if you're not at these larger conferences, what are you missing out on? You know, who's missing out on meeting you? And so in some sense, you know, it is the society's fault. It's their responsibility to make sure that they're inclusive and making sure that it is an inclusive space for people to come and to be able to build their careers. Like it is, I think, problematic, obviously, if then you feel excluded from a large society meeting. And so that's where I think the onus is on the societies to work on that.
Yeah, and we have a second question, so response to this first.
I just wanted to say that the inclusivity that is, you know, really apparent at the TAG conference is something that we've all been working with TAG for a really long time. So Rachel and I first launched VWA at TAG in 2008, and we did a baby TAG survey about who wanted to bring babies to the conference. And then the inclusivity project that we were working on, that was also a couple of years ago. Now, because I do the British Neolithic, and Tim Darvel and a lot of people on the National Committee also do the British Neolithic, I'm networked with those senior academics already. And so I've been able to bring this conversation across the board through my contact with them already. So I think what we're seeing at TAG this year is absolutely brilliant, and I think that UCL really do need applauding for really taking that on and bringing this a much different feel. You know, really, if you've gone to TAG 10 years ago, it really might not have felt like this. So this is, you know, we can work with these big societies is what I'm saying, that it is something, but it isn't something that's happening overnight. This isn't something that just happened.
And I think we have a question.
Hello. I'd like to say thank you for this panel. I think this is really useful and interesting.
Are you okay if you're on film? Okay.
So first, thank you. And then I'd like to say that I used to work in industry, and I appreciate the ability to have an action when something happens, if there is a sexist moment. And I was lucky enough to work for some amazing people. So my, anecdotes of the less nice things from people that I worked with outside of my company, and that's lovely. But then I went into doing my PhD, and I was basically subjected to non-stop bullying, and from someone, and it wasn't just me, and the university as an industry protected this person for years, and we were able eventually to do something about it, but it was absolutely horrific for more than myself, for years before me. I'm pretty sure a few careers got ruined we were able to stop this bullying. And the problem here is that you're talking about actions like suing, and that eventually companies will realize that they'll have to take responsibility or they'll get sued. The universities are behind a wall, and they are shut down, turn inwards and protect these people. So what do we do about that?
That's a really good introduction. Yeah, so that's a really good introduction to, I think, the next point I want to talk to, which is about reporting and actions in the case of harassment. I can see that we have a point over here, so let me pass this right on.
I think this is a really important point, actually, because this is where the culture change has to happen. So we have had generations of sweeping under the carpet around these behaviours, and that has to shift. And I think the only way we can assist that in shifting is through actions of public shaming, because that is all they will respond to. So the processes themselves currently are designed not to facilitate survivors, they're designed to protect staff. And when that's made visible, when it's made visible to parents, particularly in a fee-paying world, that is what facilitates change, is transparency and public shaming of these institutions who are protecting perpetrators.
Can I just say that so the university structure has a way, and I've seen this paperwork before, making people be silent if they want to complain. Then the university shuts down their ability to publicly shame someone, because then it undermines the case the university is making against this bully, apparently. And so you aren't allowed to publicly shame, or you don't get your...
That's the question I was going to ask is, can you give us some tangible ways to name and shame? Like, without, do you, what's the law? We know the law in terms of the Equality Act, but then, can you counter-suit for defamation and so on? I'm not scared of that, but I would like to know more about it.
I think Danny's case at Cambridge is a really important one, and I think we have to work through this, but we've seen that the internal processes are actually not working, and then acting, in Danny's case, we're actually contributing to the trauma around what happened to them. So they don't really fit for purpose. We can't continue to support that environment where young women who have the energy, the bravery, the courage to come forward and report are actually re-traumatized through our systems. So we have to challenge that. We have to publicly challenge it.
So are you saying, like, through social media, through calling out, like the Yesna thing was really effective. He was named, and that was really clear. And it was effective that was named by someone who was actually out, what's that, the journalist guy who then got kicked out and slightly made about him.
He's also a terrible person.
But yeah, but it was useful. He wasn't anyone in the profession, wasn't it? But he was kind of like an external. Didn't he need an external whistleblower? Actually, yeah. There is a whistleblower service
in that database.
So yeah, there is a whistleblower service that CSIC subscribed to. Now I'll look them up whilst you guys are talking. And if you work at an RO or you're a member of CSIC, can you report? I'll look them up. Then you can go directly to that whistleblowing service if there's a problem. I might put it on my 10 steps thing. I'll try some CSIC.
Yeah. And I think that, so just to go back to what's happening in universities, as you said in your example, people know about this and they have covered it up over a long period of time within institutions. And part of, I think, this culture change is having people within these institutions begin to really feel ashamed of that themselves. So it's really hard for women to come forward, and I think that a lot of women who are coming forward to us are doing so because they know we're sitting outside the structures. We're not a formal body, we're not affiliated with anyone, and we can keep things secret so they can talk to us. But within university environments, you're absolutely right. I think though that Danny's case at Cambridge is really going to change things. A lot of universities are looking at that.
I find that the case of sexism, so bullying is a bit different. It can apply to many more, it's not so gendered. And so I find sexism is getting much more of a, after Me Too, much more of a response. And people are taking more actions and things like that. But when you get bullying and a range of people, I find that the action is even less.
So I'd like it because we will slowly run it. Did you have one more? Was there a roving mic is right?
Let me just quickly say that whistleblowing charity, they're called Protect. And so if you're a member of CSIC or you work for a registered organisation, then you need to speak to an external and confidential third party.
So this will be our sort of point. So we have one in the back, in the red or maroon.
Something, yeah.
Are you okay, Bianca?
Yeah. I feel like I need to come in with non-cis survival sort of angle in this. Also from a student perspective, from experience I've had of having to report things, or my friends having to report incidents either of sexism or harassment or transphobia or whatever, is the best case scenario is you're asked to join the Equalities Committee, which is not, I'm busy. But also, I've already been traumatized. I don't want to, obviously I want to help people, but also I'm upset. And
you didn't want to do free labour?
No, I didn't want to do free labour, which I do loads anyway, because I'm a student. So, but also, what it's taught me is they only will let you shame someone if you're more useful than them, which I know sounds awful, but especially as a disabled student, if something crap happens to me, often it's pushed aside because I'm just a student and I'm not doing anything huge. I'm not bringing in money or whatever, so it's not as important. And people obviously don't say that, but it's become apparent watching other people's cases as well that if you're not important, then they don't care. That's not a question. I just wanted to.
That's extremely, and I think actually because I want to get a last final statement from the panel actually on exactly, I don't know where the mic went, sorry. I'm pretty loud, I'm American. So what I want to actually do is, because I think this is now centering in on one of the really critical issues which I know Rachel and Anne have been dealing with very firsthand, which is this issue of when it comes to a crisis point, when it comes to, we have absolute failure in reporting. We do not have a system that works. We do not have a system that works even within a single sector, let alone cross-sector. I know Hannah's just brought out the whistleblower service, but it's, if you're in this unit but not that unit, if you're not in the union, if you're we do not have a system for this, let alone one that is fair and open and transparent and arbitrary. And so I'm actually just going to go right around. And I'd actually, what I want to know is, where is this reporting system best located? And I just want a very quick your thought on this. And then we're actually going to have a slightly more interesting, pleasant presentation, but if the panel are willing to stick around for a little bit and take some extra questions, we can hang out here for a second. But I just want to go around and just say, who do we report to fix this stuff? I mean, a response from everyone is fine. I was hoping for.
Just put the microphone on. I think it has to sit outside of profession, outside academia. And I have broached this with CIFA before, and they don't feel like they're the people to do it. But one of the things from the cross-sector meeting back in July 2018 as well is this feeling that you can't report necessarily within your organisation because we're a very close profession. There's a lot of relationships within organisations. I remember one incident when somebody wanted to report but they couldn't feel they could report to their HR officer. So I think, and I don't know who, in my mind, I'd like to see an external body or a person or somewhere that anybody working in the commercial sector or in university can contact them and say, this is what's happened, get it recorded, get it logged, and then be signposted to where they need to go for the next steps. But then you have one central point where all that information is also being logged and being held, so that then you can start to see patterns. And does that, am I making sense?
Yeah.
I just you guys can say real things. I'm just going to tell you my dreams. In that cross-sector meeting, one of the things that we talked about is whether we could have some kind of Athena Swan equivalent for archaeology. So a kind of like gold standard that people aspire to. There is already external schemes like Investors in Diversity, and my understanding is that after the cross-sector meeting, Wessex went away and talked about that, and they help you do an equality and diversity audit within your workplace. If you're commercial, if you're working in academia, you've got Athena Swan, which is the same kind of thing where you have an audit of your workplace practice, and it carries weight. People want to get to the gold level, hardly anyone ever does, because it's actually really hard. And there was an appetite for that expressed at that cross-sector meeting, but there's no one to run it. And I toy with the idea all the time of thinking, should I just set that up? Should I obviously not just set it up, because it would have to be a charity or a business, or I don't know, I think I need to talk to the Women's Mentoring Heritage for some advice on it. But I sort of think that could also be that same, but I don't know, could it also be the same kind of place where A, it's for reporting, and B, it's for setting and monitoring and auditing standards of quality and diversity. And I think about it quite a lot, but I also think I really love teaching, and I don't think I want to really like any of that. Anyway, that's one thing. I know this is something you definitely say
No.
I'm Nicola Henry from the Historic Inventive Archaeology Project. That's fine. I was.
Sorry, real quick. No film, but do you want audio?
Audio is fine.
Okay.
I was at that July 2018 meeting, and it was really heartening. But one of the things I think about a lot since that is CIFA's attitude, and I'm separating CIFA E&D from central CIFA. And I found the central CIFA attitude really disheartening and shocking at that meeting, and we can spend a lot of time talking about that, but I won't. But I think they have a registered archaeological organisation system. That's the place where we need to be reporting. I think they have to step up and take responsibility for that. They really, really do. And that's my opinion.
I have had those conversations as well with CIFA, and the line I got was, they're not a trade union. They're very clear on what they consider their boundaries to be, and they didn't feel that was their remit. And I'm
not convinced that that's the case, actually, but yeah, I
think we need to keep pushing that.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this, so for us, bearing in mind that we're at a critical point, we feel we're at a critical point and we actually need fast action on these matters at the moment. I had a preliminary talking with a representative from CSIC, and there is movement there, and I think a lot of that is largely to do with the E&D group, and it's been really influential in shifting attitudes within Super Central, and that, I think that really needs to be appreciated, how far things have moved in a very short period of time because of that work that you've been doing.
Well, and also because they know about everyone else.
That's true, but
that's the collective power.
I think it's actually worked really, really well in that sense. I think we have thought for the last year or so, few years actually, 4 years, that yes, this is our professional group. Gosh, it's a chartered institute, shouldn't we be looking to them for guidance on professional practice? And yes, that's what we thought too. I think it's becoming apparent to me that we can't look to them necessarily for the leadership of this. That's not a problem. It's a positive that we're bringing them with us, and I think we can all do this collectively. But I think actually Kayt is where I currently sit on this point, that it needs to be independent. It needs actually to sit outside of the structure. It needs to be collective so that it's cross-sector, because we fall back again and again into this problem where if a unit isn't an role, we don't have the possibility for action. So I think we should be taking, we've got that reporting system up and running. What I think Anne and I would like to see is that it's no longer the responsibility of the women's group, but I'm quite happy for that to move towards a cross-sector independent group where that work is recognised and there's actually action that comes out of that into sectoral practice.
So I think that what we want to be saying at this point is that a lot of the reports that we're getting are historic and they're not current. And I think that if anybody is experiencing harassment on their phone, 2 years ago, a year ago, I started getting dick pics, anonymous dick pics, and I didn't know what to do. And I'd given my number out. I'd done a couple of archaeology projects. So I went on our closed Facebook group and I phoned the police. I phoned 101. The police response happened, everything was sorted within 2 hours. So they tried to phone the number of this guy. So basically this guy changed his number. I blocked his number, he got another number, did it from there as well. I gave them both numbers. They phoned him, left messages saying do not do this again. They then followed that up with text messages that would happen after a few days, and I think after a week, that this is a police text. Do not continue to send this offensive material, to this number. And so even with that kind of harassment over the phone, it is possible to report it to the police in the UK using the 101 number, and they are incredibly receptive. And basically, within 2 hours, this had been sorted, I changed my phone number, and I just moved on. So if something is happening, it is worth reporting it to the authorities because this is illegal. So I'm sorry, I feel like I am like the sledgehammer at the end of the table. So if something is happening, if it is assault, if it's physical assault, then that is something that should be reported to the authorities because it's really not okay. And anything else that we're talking about in terms of bullying and these other kinds of behaviours, they should have codes of conduct in place at your employer where you can raise that with your supervisor.
We're going to Becky.
We are quite close to our time, but I wanted to make 2 points. One was the issue about who takes responsibility basically for the problem, and as has been stated, we do have a professional standards body. If they don't want to actually host this, they should certainly pay for it, whoever hosts it, and I think that comes down again, someone has to pay for it, we have to stop having to do everything voluntarily, and I think the professional body, actually that is their role, when this is about professional standards and behaviour and safety, and it comes back to ceremony, and this is about culture change, about safety, health and safety. This is health and safety. This is their job to fund sorting this kind of thing out. So that's one thing. I think because what are we? Nearly on. Okay. I think everyone can sort of maybe finish with a point, but I wanted to bring in someone who's been waiting very patiently, and it kind of connects with what we've been talking about in many ways. Somebody earlier mentioned, how do we bring the micro into macro? How do we change culture? How do we change perceptions? And the example of the way that tag has changed as a culture, there are micro actions that have collectively made the whole thing different. And I wanted to give the opportunity to Amy, because one of the things that's been developed voluntary, which should have been paid or perhaps could be paid, subsequent to what you've done, is the development of a really important pack which is all about normalising health and all these aspects. So I'll give you the mic.
No, you're good with that one.
Okay. Hi. Oh, this works. So I'm Amy, and one of the things that I've done is I've been part of a fantastic team who've created a mentoring group for women, trans, LGBT, fully inclusive, across archaeology and heritage. The principle being is that, they can't, is that it's somewhere safe for people to turn around and say, hello, yes, hi, I have an issue, I have a problem, and we can signpost, we can direct, work really closely with all the amazing panellists here. We are young, we are new, but the group has grown to 700 members in a year, and one of the big things that we've done is, and there's a reason why I'm wearing some tampons around, is we've created this actually really smug, because this is really cool, the Seeing Red campaign. So some of you may have seen this go on viral. I woke up this morning and it's everywhere, which is a bit crazy. And what it is it's a free downloadable guide. If you're members of either Respect or Mentoring, it's already up on there. If not, come give me your email and I'll make sure it gets sent out. And it's downloadable and it's fully inclusive with enabled LGBT women, and it's a way of getting out this discourse saying, let's make periods a thing. Let's reclaim our bodies, let's reclaim our bodily functions, our bodily fluids. This is what our body is going to do. It's a perfectly natural state, and to help keep women, keep LGBT in archaeology. Let's tackle the periods. Let's start talking, periods. Period. Full stop. So what we've done is we've advised creating these period packs. A bit of a plug here. And it's something that should be out in every single field excavation survey, whether it's outreach, community, voluntary, academia, anything. And essentially it's just used as first aid kit. So if you need a tampon, there's a tampon. If you need a pad, there's a pad. If you're a moon cup user, great. Sometimes you still need a pad. It's one of these where it's there for anyone who wants to use it. We've got wet wipes in here, we've got tissues in here. If there's no running water, you can use the pack just to clean your hands. It's just, I think the pack up front for the box of tampons, the box of pads, and the case itself costs £12, and it's less than £6 to keep replenishing. In the welfare budgets, that is nothing. It's in health and safety laws that sanitary facilities have to be provided. So our guys just turn around and say, you as employees, you as people, this is what you can demand. These are your rights, this is your body. And as well, it opens up then this discourse and the employees turn around and go, oh, okay, shit, we have to do this. So definitely come and say hi. I'm in the exhibitors stand downstairs, and let's get discourse flowing. Let's, hey, I'm sorry, no. So that's, I'm Amy, I am the period person at the moment, and the Seeing Red campaign, it's free, because our periods should be free. It's, give me your emails and I'll get some stuff sent out to you. Does So thank you very much as well for inviting me to plug this.
Thank you. Thank you for at least allowing us to end on an optimistic, people are doing things kind of note. I think that is the best possible way. I would also like to mention that we did think that Laura Hampton was available. She's not, so sorry, her name is up there. But in case you were wondering where she was, sorry, she's not here. But I'd really like to thank an amazing, the conveners for giving us the opportunity to come and talk, and the beautiful film, which I thought was just a really nice chance to think about things in quite an in-depth way. And of course to our panelists who have done this a lot, who are forced to do this because the situation isn't fixed yet, but I'm really hopeful that if we do this together often enough, we can stop doing it. That's the goal. Yeah, I don't know if anyone wants a final word. Right, okay, so we're, oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, just to say thank you ever so much everyone on the panel for sharing your experiences, your stories, your thoughts, your ideas, what we can do. I'm really excited. I think it's going to be really good. Thank you for coming as well. And I guess finally, I think we really want to turn this, as we said at the beginning, into kind of practical action, practical next steps. There's a lot going on, there's a lot happening, and it's quite an exciting time. If anyone wants to be involved, I guess come and talk to anyone here or myself and Beth. If you want to leave with your contact details, and Cecilia as well, leave with your contact details and be part of a kind of ongoing production or discussion, then yeah, do that. But just thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, of course, for our amazing audiovisual. Thank you to Fame and to Doug Rochford, who has done amazing things with the live stream and the PowerPoints and the films and everything else. But yes, thank you very much, and hopefully we will have a little bit of time if people are going to just sort of mill around and chat, and then I believe there is some sort of party later. But thank you, yeah, that's it. We're good.